Hello, and everything is alrighty and all goody. And aloha there. We're going to be heading to the entertainment side in the Victorian era. So let's see what they had to do to entertain each other during this time where there's no internet. Which it's a bit depressing when you think about it, but I'm just saying that as a person who was raised with the internet. So, popular forms of entertainment varied by social class. Victorian Britain, like the periods before it, was interested in literature, theater, and the arts. See aesthetic movement and pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Never heard of that before. Let's see. The Raphaelite Brotherhood was a group of English painters, poets, and art critics founded in 1848 by William Holman Hunt, John Everett Milius, Dante Gabriel Rosaletti, William Michael. Okay, yeah, we get it. An aesthetic movement, let's see. It was an art movement in the late 19th century which privileged okay, what is it? Privilege the aesthetic value of literature, music, and arts over their social-political functions. According to this, some art should be produced to be beautiful rather than serve a moral, allegorical, and diabolical purpose. So, just for the sake of it being beautiful. That explains a lot, especially since it's just aesthetics. I guess you just focus on aesthetics and you just find it beautiful, the aesthetics. Pablo performing Ashley Ethereal Theater, 1847. Alrighty. Another picture, the Epstein Dempsey painting by James Hollard, 1840, and Llandudno, 1856. With the arrival of the railroad network, seaside towns became popular destination for Victorian holiday. Michael Bolf. Alright, let me go back to see if this speak it now. Should be good. I think so. Yeah. Alrighty. Michael Bolf was the most popular British grand opera composer of the period, which most popular musical theater was a series of 14 comic operas by Gilbert and Sullivan, although there was also a musical Bursley in the beginning of the Edwardian music comedy in the 1890s. Alright, let's go with low comedy through Shakespeare. Alrighty, musical drama. Influences novels in the era. Jim went to dining clubs like the Beef Steak Club or the Savage. What the Beef Steak Club is a name or nickname of several 18th century and 19th century male dining clubs in Britain and Australia that celebrate the beef steak as a symbol of patriotic and often vague concepts of liberty and prosperity. Okay, so apparently they worship food. Now let's go with Savage Club. Founded in 1857, is a gentleman's club in London named after the poet Richard Savage. Members are drawn from the fields of art, drama, law, literature, and music or science. Okay, at least the club is not solely just to eat meat. It's actually a club. But I think they did a bunch of art and literature while eating steak at the same time. Why not? This was before the internet. Gambling at cards in establishment popular called casinos was widely popular during the period, so much so that the evangelical and reform movement specifically targeted such establishments in efforts to stop gambling, drinking, and prostitution. Brass bands. Okay, Brass bands and the bandstand became popular in the Victorian era. The bandstand was a simple construction that not only created an ornamental focal point, but also served acoustic requirements whilst providing shelter from the changeable British weather. It was common to hear the sound of a brass band while strolling through parklands. At the time, musical recording was still very much a novelty. Alrighty. Victoria also going to nature the British Circus. Alright. The permanent structure sustaining 3 fires, but the institution last a full century with Andrew Thorogood and William Badley managing the theater in the middle part of the century. Traveling circuses like Pablo's Fankus dominate the British provinces, Scotland, and Ireland. Fanku also stands as a black man who achieved great success and enjoyed great admiration among the British public only a few decades after Britain had abolished slavery. And there's a picture of LA Now, 1844, by David Activist Hill and Robert and Adamson. Okay, pioneer Hill photography. And here, the Scottish painter, activist, photographer. Okay. Another form of entertainment involved spectacles where paranormal events such as memberism. Memberism? Let's see. Yeah, memberism communication with the dead by the way of membership, or channeling ghost conjuring and the work. The membership and channeling ghost conjuring and the like was carried out to delight crowds of participants. Such activities were more popular at the time than in other periods of recent Western history. Natural history became increasingly an amateur activity, particularly in Britain and the United States. This grew to specialist hobbies such as the study of birds, butterflies, seashells, mycology, and chronological beetles and wildflowers. Amateur collectors and nature history amateur entrepreneurs played an important role in building the large natural history collections of the 19th century and the early 20th century. Middle class Victorians used to train services to visit the seaside, helped by the Bank Holiday Act of 1871, which created many fixed holidays, large numbers traveling to quiet fishing villages such as Worthing, Morecambe, Scarborough began turning into major tourist centers or centuries, and people like Thomas Cook saw tourism and even overseas travel as viable businesses. Also, look, Tom Cook was an English businessman. He was also known as the founder of the travel agency Thomas Cook and Son. Okay. Now we're on to sports. The Victorian era saw the introduction and development of many modern sports, often originating in the public schools. They exemplified new idealism of manliness. Cricket, cycling, rocket, horse riding, and many water activities are examples of some of the popular sports in the Victorian era. Alright, let me move a little bit closer and rearrange this. That should help. If it was way down here, it starts flashing one more, and up here, it starts flashing more. That's what it gives. Making sure the camera does work right. That's what I'm afraid about. Thanks to new idealism of manliness, cricket, cycling, and croquet, horse riding, and many water activities are examples of some of the popular sports in the Victorian era. The modern game of tennis originated in Birmingham, England between 1859 and 1865. The world's oldest tennis tournament, the Wimbledon Championships, was first played in London in 1877. Britain was an active competitor, and all the Olympic Games started in 1896. High culture. A picture of Leadenhall Street, London, 1837. The Poultry Cross, Salisbury, painted at Louis Rainier, 1877. Gothic revival architecture became increasingly significant during the period, leading to the battle of styles between Gothic and classical ideals. Charles Barry's architecture of the new palace. Oh yeah. So that was short. It is just high culture. Now, if it is just high culture, I'm just going to skim through this. I'm just reading out the party points. 1934 fire. Let's see what that is. The Palace of Westminster, the medieval royal palace used as the home of the British Parliament, was largely destroyed by fire on 16 October 1834. The blaze was caused by the burning of small wooden holly sticks, which have been used as a part of accounting procedures of the exchequer. Alright. Alright. It was built in the medieval style of the Westminster Hall. This is right part of the building, constructed near the cultural continuity. Alright. It's expressed in different novels, The French Revolution, History, and Charles Dickens's Great Expectations. They tell two cities. Gothic was also supported by critic John Musk. Alright, let's see here. As opposed to classicism, the middle 19th century saw the Great Expedition of 1851. Let's see what one is. The Great Expedition of the Works of Industry of All Nations, also known as Great Expedition or the Crystal Palace Expedition, was an international exhibit which took place in Hyde Park, London from 1st May to 15th October 1851. That long? Shoot. Man. The first World's Fair would showcase the greatest innovation in the century at the center was the Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace was a cast iron and plate glass structure originally built in Hyde Park, London, and housed the Great Expedition of 1851. So that's actually how it looks. Wow. It's pretty modern. Whole thing's saying. A modular glass and iron structure, the first of its kind, it was condemned by Rusk in a very model of mechanical dehumanization and design, but later came to the present as a prototype of modern architecture. The emergence of photography showcased in the Great Expedition resulted in significant changes in the Victorian era, with Queen Victoria being the first British monarch to be photographed. And yeah, I was there. Neoclassical Romanism, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, along with the growing popularity of romantic love spilled over the literature and fine arts, which leads to gallery of selected Victorian paintings. So, yeah, one in the countryside in 1840, another one in 1851, the Hurling Shepherd, and the Monarch of the Glen, 1851. A lot of portraits, but also the British countryside around this area. A Hopeless Dawn, 1888. China Sleeping. This one, Godspeed, 1900 by Edward Langton. Alrighty, so yes, just select Victorian paintings that were very important. There's not much of a description other than the artist, not the exact painting, but I guess that the appeal of aestheticism and the movement of that ensures that people will focus more on how beautiful an art piece is rather than the description, if it has more purpose or not. Now we're on to journalism. In 1817, Thomas Behrens became general editor of the Times. He was the political radical, a sharp critic of the parliamentary hypocrisy, and the champion of freedom of the press. Ooh, yeah. Meanwhile, there's more magazines that spoke to the reform. W.H. also wrote immensely influential dispatches on the creating Monroe of 1853 through 1956. Let me see anything else. Irish reporter of the Times. He spent covered. Well, should I go? Yeah, I should just go briefly to it because I just want to see other than the Crimean War. What else he put? Siege of Sevastopol. Oh, the Indian Rebellion in 1857, and then the American Civil War, and Austro-Prussian War, and the Franco-Prussian War. Okay, if I explain this because I do know what these bits say. But the Times. Let's click at the Times. The Times. It's a British national based in London. It began in 1785 under the title The Daily Universal Registry, adopting the current name on January 1788. The Times. And yeah, this is what it looks like. The Times. Spies guard nuclear sites from China, cyber attack. And this was 2015. So now they still exist. Yeah, what was it, 1785? Damn. Oh yeah, you got more people starting to read. Therefore, a lot of people are now understanding more of the news, especially what's going on. Especially the Crimean War, due to it was a grand war that a lot of people were involved with and was controversial, like the Napoleonic Wars. But Russell wrote one dispatch that highlighted the surge's inhuman barbarity and the lack of ambulance care for wounded troops. Shocked and outraged, the public reacted to the backlash that led to major reforms involving the provision of nursing led by Florence Nightingale. Yay! The Manchester Guardian was founded in Manchester in 1821 by a group of nonconformist businessmen. Its most famous editor, Charles Bridwich Scott, made The Guardian into the world-famous newspaper in the 1890s. The Daily Telegraph in 1856 became the first penny newspaper in London. It was funded by advertising revenue based on a large audience. Now we're on to leisure. The idea of a large amphitheater for musical performance conversation into the imagination, which is Henry Cole. Cole planned to build the one with due regard to the principles of sound. After the death of Principal, the project has additional goal commemorating him. Estimated there was not enough space for 7,165 people plus 1,200 performers. Okay. Armageddon Beach in 1899. Oh, that's actually a full-colored picture. Alrighty, let's see. Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Everybody's just hanging out a bit. They bring their own damn benches because they don't want to sit down where. Yeah, sure, whatever. I just not want to keep swimming. Except these few people, these kids. Opportunity for leisure activities decreased dramatically as real wages continued to grow and hours to work continued to decline. The urban areas in the 9th-hour workday became increasingly the norm. The Factory Act 1874 lifted the working week to 56.5 hours, encouraged the movement to eventually 8-hour workday. 200 seats were reserved emerged thanks to the cheap hotels and expensive railroad fares. And the weekends. By the late Victorian era, the leisure industry has merged into all cities and provides scheduled entertainment for suitable length of convenient locales and expensive prices. Trick to the working class teas, and then sports by 1900 generates some of the 3% of the total gross national product, such as lawn tennis, golf. Women were not allowed in some sports, such as were now allowed in some sports like archery, tennis, ultimate, and gymnastics. Alright. Now you know when Victorian era was one point at the modern day, because there's a lot more leisure activities people do nowadays. Demographic transition. Britain had led in rapid economic and population growth. At the time, Thomas Malthus believed the lack of growth outside Britain was due to the carrying capacity of the local environments. Great Britain escaped the musical trap. The Victorian was a time of the present population growing in Britain. Yeah, it talks about the economic circuit of the first, full fertility, that this is not the first demographic transition. And fertility rates and mortalities, yeah, I'm just skimming through it because it would be more of numbers and statistics. And I'd rather just explain all of it by itself in another time, at any point, or some point. That's something I could say. Western nations completely in transition from early 1900s. It's occurred in 2 stages. Down to the estimated 25% of the Middle Ages, there was no catastrophe for epidemic or famine in England or Scotland. In the 19th century, it was the first century in which a major epidemic did not occur throughout the whole country. Yeah, fertility rates increased in every decade until 1901 when the rates started evening out. There was several reasons for this. One, biological, the improving living standards and stuff. Now, the net reproduction rate was introduced as an alternate measure. It measures the average fertility rate of women of childbearing ages. Crude birth rate. It's related to that. High rates of birth also occurred because of the lack of birth control, mainly because women lacked knowledge of birth control methods, and the practice was seen as unrespectable. I mean, that's interesting because they didn't talk much about that, especially under other topics. Well, again, this is just a wiki page. One wiki page. In the olden days, people typically have many children as they could afford in order to ensure that the few of them would survive to adulthood and have children of their own due to high child mortality rates. Yeah, you could say. Yeah, social attitude towards contraception warmed, leading to the negative correlation between intelligence and fertility. Factors linked to general intelligence, such as the socioeconomic status and educational attainment, were also found to be negatively correlated with fertility, startling from the 19th century. And the thing I do wonder about birth rate is, was that the big reason for that? That the life expectancy of infants is a form of birth rate that people follow? Nah, I do believe it's more than that, especially with understanding about the women's side in the time and how there was improvements with what they want to live in their life and what they want to choose to do in their life, especially when it comes to motherhood. Economy, industrial, and trade progress. Life in the late 1700s had been little different from life in the late Middle Ages, but in the 19th century saw dramatic technological development. Interesting. I mean, the life I'm thinking about is the common person who worked in the agricultural realm. But I mean, I get it because I can understand some parts in different eras, royalty and stuff were having their own things to figure and deal with. Let's read more into that. Someone alive in 1804 would have known about the electric telegraph, the steamship, and the circular saw, the bicycle, and the steam-powered locomotive. If a person lived to 1870, he or she would have heard of the mention of the electric light bulb, typewriter, calculator, the rubber tire, the washing machine, the internal combustion engine, plastic, and dynamite. Entering powerless, especially communication and transportation, made Great Britain the leading industrial powerhouse and trading nation of the world at that time. So, inventions. Yeah, I could say that. I'll go more into how they spend more of their time because of the whole an era transforming daily life, especially from an agriculture to industrial society, and how that started expanding more and more, especially in the late 1800s. Yeah. That should be the second era because of Victoria's husband's death around the 1860s. So that would spark a change. The improvement in technological processes and the invention of the new ones, accompanied by an even more remarkable development of old and new means of locomotive intercommunication. Thomas Henry Huxley. According to historians David Brandon and Alan Brookley, the new system of railroads after 1830 brought into being our modern world. Steam engine content, railroad steel, electrical engineering, chemistry, petrochemicals, automobiles, and information technology, all from this timeline. Prosperity, recession, depression, and improvement that occurs around here. Also, the steam engine is around the 1700s, but yeah, they started getting more and more problems around that. What is it? Around 1820s on up? Yeah, they grow more and more. It's just fascinating that, I mean, there's also technology that did exist during the Regency era, but they just didn't put much of a focus on that. It didn't have much of a change. But it does show the factorization in the industrial society in urban areas really point out to that. Especially in Great Britain at that time. I do wonder about the US with its Gilded Age. Impact in improving the diet. Probably smaller agriculture industry was able to feed a much larger urban population. They helped Britain become the workshop of the world by reducing transport costs not only of raw materials but the fishing goods, large amounts of which were exported. And therefore, historians have characterized the mid-Victorian era, 1850 through 1870, as Britain's golden years. It was not until the 3 decades following the Second World War that substantial economic growth was seen again. In the long-term view, the mid-Victorian boom was on swing of the I can't pronounce it. Conjunctive cycle. There was prosperity as the national income per person grew by half. Much of the prosperity was due to the increasing industrialization, especially the textiles and machinery, as well as the worldwide network of exports that produced profits of the British merchants, British entrepreneurs, railroads in India, and many independent nations. More onward. Alrighty. And yeah, the introduction of more religions, organizations, and then taxes into local governments. In December 1844, Rochdale Society of Couture Pioneers founded, which is considered the first cooperative in the world. Founding members were the group of 28, of them which were weavers. Cooperative. Consumer cooperative is one of the first ways the patron divided, forming the basis for modern cooperative movement. The way I could think about it is company, but yeah, cooperative organization. It's well, here's an idea that I believe in. I do believe that the most popular companies that in the modern day is very similar would be these groups that were formed by these European countries like the West and the East Indian Company, and also other ones for the Dutch, for the Portuguese. That is the earliest forms of a company. But looking at how things are changing from the Industrial Revolution and how people are following, I could be that. But then again, that's a thought I have. A street stall in London during the 1870s, right here, and then some coffee. Many European companies, such as steam machine producer J. Cameron, model themselves on English industry. On the countryside. Now there's housing. Very rapid growth of population in the 19th century in the cities included the new industrial and manufacturing cities, as well as the service centuries such as the Edinburgh and London. As you can see here in the picture, part of Charles Booth's poverty map showing the Old Nickel, a slum in the east end of London, published in 1889 in Life and Labor of the People in London. The red areas are middle class, well-to-do. Light blue areas are poor, 18s to 21s, a week of moderate life family. Dark blue areas are very poor, casual, chronic want, and the black areas are the lowest class, occasional laborers, street sellers, loafs, rentals, and self-criminals. Working class life in Victorian Wares, West Yorkshire. Girl putting a coal tub in my farm. Report of the Parliamentary Commission in the mid-19th century. Poverty. 19th century Britain saw a huge population increase accompanied by the rapid urbanization stimulated by the Industrial Revolution. The pretty much goes with housing. And wage ratings improved steadily. Real wages were 75% higher than 1901 compared to 1877. So yeah, it just shows that each decade that comes afterwards is starting to change and change rapidly because this growing population and the city is making a lot of people very stressed out with their lives. Therefore, a lot of change. Just stressful because a lot of change is happening. Yeah, people flood into industrial areas and commercial cities faster than housing could be built, resulting in overcrowding and lacking in sanitation facilities such as fresh water and sewage. And yeah, I gotta look at the time. I pretty much can go over this next time. So, till then, aloha.